So I've been using makeup brushes with graphite, and that's just been a game changer. Hi, my name is Jono, and if you're new here, I do pencil drawings. I've been working with graphite for 13 years now. And over those years, I've learned a bunch of tricks, and I've shifted from different techniques to try and get the effects that I get. I try to push graphite as far as I can. And I think one of the things I've always struggled with is how graphite doesn't have as much contrast as things like charcoal. And so doing things like dark backgrounds or getting really dark, rich tones has always been a big problem for me. But the other problem has been the more you push graphite to try and get those values, the harder it is to get your details back out. You saturate your paper with graphite and you almost permanently stain it and can't really get those crisp highlights back out. And so I thought in this video I'd go through some of the tips that I've been learning over the years. Also, this video is sponsored by Squarespace, but we'll tell you more about them later. The first video I ever did on YouTube where I was speaking to the camera was a tips and tricks video. This is a clip from there. So for this video, I'm explaining which tools I use, starting with a pencil. So just a normal pencil. I usually work with the darkest graphite that I can get, or the softest graphite. So for these, that's an 8B. I just find it very easy to manipulate soft graphite. I can push it around the paper and get all the textures that I want. Looking back on that is pretty crazy. Just seeing the way that I present the information I'm trying to get across has changed a lot. So it's kind of nice to be able to see that progress. One of my approaches with pencil has always been to try and treat it more as a movable medium. So when you think of a pencil, the material that we're using is graphite. But the way that it's applied through a pencil is a very direct approach. I usually prefer to use powder. So in that way, it kind of feels a little bit more like a dry brush technique with oil paints or something along those lines. So viewing it as a medium that can be spread and pushed around and blended gently has changed the way that I approach it. Also, with that mindset, it's a lot more conducive to removing graphite. So if you apply it very gently and get some of those rich tones, but through a gentle method, you can then erase it a lot more effectively. And that's allowed me to really push those limits of getting some rich contrast and then still being able to pull out some of those highlights. For many years, the way that I was applying graphite was with cotton wool, and I still do. There's a lot of times where that's a more direct and quicker approach to getting your material onto your paper. But I'm kind of kicking myself about this, that I only started using brushes to get my graphite onto the paper kind of recently, so maybe a year or 2 years ago. And it's become a massive part of my technique since then. Originally, I was a little bit lost. I'd see other artists using brushes and I didn't really like the effects that they were getting, but then more and more artists were using them. Some artists that I really admire started using them and I was like, okay, there must be something here. And I went and got some brushes, but the effects I got were really nothing special. It was really difficult to try and get dark tones or accurate tones with brushes, and I felt that it was just a clumsy tool and cotton wool seemed to be doing the job just fine. But then I decided to try a makeup brush. So a brush that's designed to move powder around. So I've been using makeup brushes with graphite, and that's just been a game changer with the way that I move graphite around on my paper. I'm usually looking for brushes with relatively stiff bristles. So makeup brushes have quite stiff bristles, and it's quite interesting. I found a bunch of different brands, and even within the same brands, sometimes different batches apply graphite in a different way. So I've kind of got my favorite brushes, which I really hope don't get lost or damaged or eaten by Maya. Even buying the exact same brand, the one brush behaves differently to the other. So I'm continuously on the hunt for that perfect makeup brush, but I'll try and share with you some of the ones that I found work really well, and you can experiment with those to see the results that you can get. So the way that I work is I'll usually try and get a little bit of material down, a little bit of graphite either with a pencil, or I'll use graphite powder with a brush or cotton wool. Depends on the kind of texture I'm trying to achieve. I view that as the mark that I'm making. From there, I can manipulate that mark. I can choose to refine the edge with an eraser, or if I'm using a hard tool like a pencil, I can get that sharp edge through the application. I'll very seldom leave graphite applied the way that it is with a pencil. I'll often go over it with a blending stump or a very fine brush to try and remove some of the unintentional marks that'll happen when you're cross-hatching or hatching or just doing, shading with a pencil. There's definitely times where I want to embrace those marks, and I'll leave it quite rough, and I love the effects that I can get through that kind of drawing. But often I really want to try and smooth it out and get really soft tones, especially when I'm drawing skin, and using a brush to soften and smooth over the graphite often allows me to pull out really tiny wrinkles with my erasers. Working with graphite in this way takes a lot of time, and I think that's been a really big one for me to get over. And then just anyone that I've spent a bit of time mentoring, it's generally one of the first things we start to talk about is your emotional approach to the drawing. There are a few paradigm shifts that we have to make when thinking of producing artworks like this with graphite. The first one being that it's not just a pencil on paper, it's a movable medium. So applying graphite to the page is just the first step. From there, we have a myriad of tools that we can use to try and move it around and remove it, bring back those whites from the original paper. Realizing that opens up a whole lot of methods and ways in which we put that graphite onto the paper. And I'm still figuring tons of things out every single month, so it's a long experimental process, which I absolutely love. I think when you approach it with that mindset of experimentation, the medium becomes a lot more rewarding and the results you get are really special. So that's one of the big shifts, I think, that have helped me over the years. The other thing that graphite has taught me is expectation management. The original idea of how long I'm going to spend on a drawing is never accurate. I always think it's going to go a lot faster than how it actually ends up going in reality. Even though I'm constantly looking for shortcuts to try and achieve a texture as quickly as possible, I constantly have to bring myself back to, if this is going to be good, it's probably going to take a long time. And that just stays true no matter how many techniques and tricks I learn. It's something really special that when you stop rushing to try and finish these drawings in an unrealistic amount of time, that they become extremely rewarding. And often again, the results are always there to feel proud of. The big takeaway for anyone who's starting out with graphite is that this medium is incredibly dynamic and there's a lot of experimentation to be done. So for those of you who are just starting out, try playing around with different tools. Experiment with blending stumps and different erasers, and don't get stuck into one way of doing things. And especially if your drawings aren't looking the way that you want them to, there's so much value in those mistakes. We have to make those mistakes in order to learn from them. It's really nice for me to recap and summarize what pencil has taught me over the last couple of years. And every time I talk about it, something new seems to have changed, or I've learned something new about the process. Before I end this video, I just want to give a quick shout out to this video sponsor, Squarespace. I've been working with them for a couple of years now, and they've played a huge role in my career, not only in sponsoring these videos and helping me maintain this channel, but more importantly, early on in my career, I didn't have time to try and learn how to build a website. That whole thought of learning HTML and everything was so daunting and would just take an age to try and design something beautiful. I was looking for a way to showcase my work, to make it easy for collectors to find my work and get in touch with me. And I felt that Squarespace did that effortlessly. I never had to patch or upgrade anything. I could register a domain with them and set up an online store. And most importantly, I could design a portfolio and show my work the way that I wanted to. Also, every time I got stuck, their amazing support team helped me out instantly. So if you're looking to build a website, give Squarespace a try. And if you decide that you love them, use this offer code and get 10% off your first purchase. It's always nice for me to dive back into what graphite has taught me. And every couple months, I learn something new. It seems to be an endless learning process for me. One of the big ones is continuously coming back to patience and mindfulness. And I think that those are incredibly important qualities to practice, especially for a medium like pencil. But at the same time, learning some tips and tricks along the way to make things a little bit faster is always helpful. I'd love to hear in the comments what kind of tips or tricks you guys have used to try and speed up your process, or if there's any tools that have kind of revolutionized the way that you work. I'm so glad that I finally found these brushes that I can work with, because they've become an absolute necessity in my toolkit. But yeah, thanks for the support. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.